Hey there. Well, it's been a little while since we last did a video, and well, you know, it's been quite a few weeks, but hopefully over the worst now. Still feeling quite tired, but I treated myself as a little bit of a make myself feel better present with a little bit of something here now. So without further ado, let's take a closer look. Well, what we've got here is went out and picked up for myself. I was actually looking for one of the Oxford Rail war wells. Now, they didn't have any in the later Tops era liveries, but this really caught my eye. And it's the Oxford Rail Carflat wagon, but in the slightly later blue Motorail livery. Now, we've reviewed this before, and I've got one here. In fact, this is the one that we reviewed before in the weathered BR brown livery. And this one was for delivering new vehicles. But this particular livery here, this tended to run in the actual Motorail train. So you could go to a Motorail terminal, you'd drive your car onto one of these wagons, there'd be coaches in the train that you'd ride in, and it just saved the aggro of the long road journey. And of course, back in the 60s and 70s, Britain's motorway network wasn't as well developed, so you could imagine that driving from, say, London all the way up to Edinburgh or Glasgow and beyond would have been quite an ordeal. Back then, the A1, for example, would have been riddled with roundabouts and single carriageway sections, so it would have been quite a horrendous journey. So it just allowed the train to take a little bit of the pain away. Now, Oxford Rail has released this. We've got the catalogue code OR76CAR003, and I think we've got it in this oversized box, which a lot of talk on the internet is that this is in preparation for the Mark III coaches that they've announced that are going to be forthcoming. Now, Mark III coach is not really my cup of tea, so it's unlikely that I'm going to be getting myself any. But I think it's probably a smart move by Oxford Rail to have a standard size of box. So let's get ourselves into this. And I'll put that down there. And just as we had with the previous Carflat wagon, we've got the little plastic bag there with the chocks. And as I explained in that last video, I'm not going to really dwell on anything that I talked at length on in that video, but these were just on the real ones, chocks to help secure the vehicles in place and to stop any that had slightly dubious handbrakes from moving around. Now we can see it's a perfectly clean livery, and it's really, really nicely reproduced. And unlike the weathered brown version, I'm going to take all these cars off. The biggest difference that stands out is the actual Motorail signs, and these are actually quite firmly attached. I think they're glued on. They do seem to be very firmly glued on, which does make a change for Oxford Rail, because one of the big issues, as you can see there, is with the buffers that pull out. Actually, I do think that Oxford Rail have listened to the criticism, because this was one of the first release, and those buffers are really quite loose. And as we've talked about with some of the other Oxford Rail wagons that have been released previously, the buffers have all been very, very loose. But with this wagon, they can be pulled out, but they feel like there's been an upgrade in the glue. So that is a really good plus point from Oxford Rail. So these aren't as likely to go missing in the packaging, so I like that. What we can see is there's not really that much, if anything, in the way of difference underneath. Let's see, I think that's probably the right way around. Yeah, so we can see there that we've got the close coupling mechanisms, the same as the last one. So all of this underframe detail is exactly the same as in the last review. So if you want to get a much closer look at a review of the nitty-gritty of these models, go back and have a look at that video. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a link to it here just to help you out to have a look at that if you need to go back and take a look. But what I want to concentrate on is the differences in the details. We've got this this blue, which is a sort of rail blue finish on the wagon, and it's really nicely done and a kind of satin feel to that colour. And it really, really does work very, very well. And it's just reproduced perfectly in my mind. We've got the bogies picked out in the satin black, and they look fine even without the dusting over of the weathering that this other version of the wagon has had. We've also got very crisply tempo printed data panels, running number. We've also got the works plate there for the wagon, and again it's printed over the top of some of the relief detail of the wagon. Now that's a bit of a detraction for me. I mean, obviously it's in the right place for the wagon, but it just seems a shame that they've not done something to kind of alleviate that wibbly wobbly feel, for want of a technical term, where it goes over the relief detail, and it is just a minor detraction. The Motorail boards there with the British Rail double arrow logo, again very crisply tempo printed. It's clearly all been painted and printed before it's gone on the wagon. So we've got the very crisp edge with the white. There's no overspray at the back, and we can see the rail blue stanchions there, all in the appropriate colour without any hint of bleed through between the two. The actual deck here, we've got this sort of cream colour, and this fits in with the wood being quite faded, and wood does go to a funny sort of like white, light grey colour when it's been out in the sun and has faded. And compared with the ready weathered wagon, I have to say I prefer it like this. In the weathered wagon, the overspray is kind of coloured around the edges in a very peculiar pattern, and it, in my mind, didn't work as well as perhaps it could have done. But on the clean wagon, we can see that actually it works really well in this this base colour, and Oxford Rail have actually managed to get wood that kind of looks reasonably well there. It is something that if you want to weather that up with dry brushing powders, you get a really, really good effect on there. And it's almost arguable that if you want to do a weathering job on these wagons, it's probably actually better to begin with the unweathered wagon, because the weathering on this particular release here probably isn't conducive, certainly on the actual deck, to being improved upon with weathering without having to do something with this strange overspray pattern. We've got tempo printing on the ends, no loose shunting, which is in a different style to the other wagon, and it's all faithfully reproduced from the real wagons. So all in all, I have to say this is a fine addition to the Oxford Rail stable, and I think it's a work of genius. As I said in the last review video, it really does give a good market for Oxford die-cast cars. So really good joined up thinking there. And what we can see, if we get these cars, they're just drawn at random, so they're not in keeping necessarily with the period for this wagon, but we can fit 4 of the Oxford die-cast cars per wagon. And actually, once you load it up with cars, there's a really good weight to that. It does run actually pretty well, either loaded or unloaded, but the weight of 4 Oxford die-cast cars really does actually give it a good presence on the track. Just to go back to the data panel, just a quick thing I've noticed that I didn't draw attention to before. We can see that actually this particular wagon is coded FVX, so F for flat wagon, V for the Carflat, but X means that it's got both air and vacuum brakes, so it's dual braked, and that was more to be able to work with all manner of coaching stock, some of which would have been air braked, some of which would have been vacuum braked. Whereas this particular release, as we drew attention to before, is coded FVV. Now, you're probably wondering, well, yes, that's fairly obvious. But one of the things I've noticed is that there doesn't seem to be any real difference in the brake detail on the underside. If I turn them to be the right way round, in the vacuum cylinders or the linkages, or indeed anything different on the bogies. And I'm not sure, but my feeling is that on the dual braked wagon there should be something else knocking about on the underside to go with the air braking side of the system. I'd have to check that up, and again, the underside of the wagon is something that you're not really going to see an awful lot of, so it's probably not really a big potential problem, but it's just something, I'm putting that out there. Overall, a really good model here in a different era from Oxford Rail, and if you're a collector of the Oxford diecast cars, it allows for some interesting train formations and also, dare I say it, a bit of play value on your model layout. Well, I hope that was informative to you. Don't forget to like this video, share it too, and also subscribe to the channel, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when we put them up. And also have a look back through the back catalogue if you haven't already done so. We've got so many different videos there, and they're just, well, you're something for everybody, so have a good look through. Anyway, you take very good care of yourself. This is me, Jenny Kirk, saying until next time, bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.